Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I want to show you my new record for the longest roller coaster ever created in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. My previous record was 232 days and, as you might already know if you've seen the title of this video, I royally smashed that record with this new coaster. Before I show you the coaster itself, I want to explain how the main mechanic of the coaster works. Both my previous and new record use block breaks to divide the track into multiple block sections. Block sections work as follows. If a train is about to enter a new block section, it is only allowed to continue if the previous train has already left that block section. If the previous train is still in that block section, the train is held by the block brakes until the next section is clear. This prevents trains from colliding if brakes stop working or if a train suddenly doesn't make a hill or something for whatever reason. The aspect that the train can only enter the next block section once the previous train has cleared it can be abused to make the ride a lot longer. Here is a simple example with 8 trains. The block brakes on this track are highlighted in yellow and the black part is the main and long part of the track. If we follow the blue train, we can see that after it has traversed the black part of the track, it cannot continue as there is still a train in the next block section, which is also waiting to continue. The train after the blue train has now left the station and only once it has also traveled the entire black part of the ride, the blue train can continue to the next section. This has to happen 5 more times before the blue train is finally back at the station. This means that with 8 trains, the time it takes for a single train to get back to the station is roughly 7 times the time it takes to travel the black part of the track. Once when it travels it itself and 6 more times when it is waiting for other trains to do the same. You may have noticed that 7 is 1 less than the number of trains, and this will always be true. If you have 100 trains on a similar track, the total ride time will be 99 times the time it takes for 1 train to complete the main part of the ride. Now that we know how the principle works, we can improve upon it. There are 2 ways to do this. One way is to increase the number of trains, and the other way is to increase the length of the long block section. The maximum number of trains possible in the game on a single ride is 31, so maximizing that is easy. We simply need to build 32 block sections. Increasing the length is also pretty easy. All you have to do is keep making the coaster longer. There is a limit to this though, which is the landscape data limit. If you have reached this limit, you cannot build any more stuff like path, scenery and rides in your park. A track piece that takes up a single tile, like a straight piece or a tiny turn, takes up 1 unit of landscape data. The landscape data limit is roughly 131,000, which means that the longest coaster possible is roughly 131,000 straight pieces long. The largest park possible is 254 by 254 tiles, which is a total of 64,516 tiles. This means that if you build the coaster back and forth and utilize every or almost every tile in the park, the longest coaster possible is going to be 2 layers and a bit big. This is exactly what I did with my previous record. This coaster uses up all the landscape data and is divided into 32 block sections. 31 tiny ones near the end of the ride and 1 enormous one that takes up the rest of the ride. Another aspect to how long it takes a train to travel the long block sections is the speed of the train. The minimum speed of all trains is 1 km per hour and it is reached pretty quickly, so the train will be traveling at that minimum speed for almost the entire ride. This coaster takes 232 real-life days to complete and already takes up all the landscape data, so you might wonder how I was able to make it even longer. Since the maximum number of trains is fixed at 31, we have to focus on increasing the time between 2 trains leaving the station. Currently, that time is the time it takes for 1 train to travel the long block section of a coaster that is the longest it can possibly be. So how do we make that even longer? The solution to this is the Synchronize with Adjacent Stations option. In this example, you can see two rides that have their stations synchronized. One short one and one long one that does 5 circuits. The train on the short ride can depart the station only when the train on the long ride has done all its laps. This is the clue that caused me to come up with a way to increase the time between two trains leaving the station. What if you build one huge coaster that has the maximum number of laps possible and combine it with another tiny coaster that has 31 trains on 32 block sections? That is exactly what I did. This is my new record for the longest coaster ever. You can see two coasters. One short, white Wild Mouse with 31 cars on 32 block sections, and one huge golden mini coaster that takes up the rest of the landscape data. These two coasters have their stations synchronized, just like the two coasters in the example. When we put both rides into test mode, we can see that both the black Wild Mouse car and the only car on the mini coaster leave the station. If we wait for a bit for all the cars on the block break to move to the next block break, we can see that now all the cars are stuck one block break further than they were before. The next car can only leave the station once the pink car on the golden coaster has completed the ride. The maximum possible number of laps is 20, so instead of the time between two cars leaving the station being a single lap of the huge coaster, it is now 20 times as long. Only once the car on the golden coaster has done its 20 laps, the next car of the Wild Mouse can depart the station. This means that this tiny Wild Mouse coaster takes roughly 20 times as long to complete as the huge coaster that held the previous record. The reason the big coaster is a mini roller coaster and not a Wild Mouse coaster, which is slightly more efficient in terms of landscape data usage because it has tiny turns, is that no coasters with access to tiny turns are able to do multiple circuits. The mini coaster is the next best thing, so I went with that. Now that we know how the ride works, let's calculate how long it exactly takes. I say calculate because testing the ride simply takes way too long. Luckily, it is quite easy to calculate this. We know that the length of the Wild Mouse is the time between two trains leaving the station multiplied by the number of trains minus 1, which is 30. We also know that the time between two trains leaving the station is 20 laps of the huge coaster. From this, we can conclude that the length of the Wild Mouse is the same as 20 times 30, or 600, laps of the huge coaster. Testing how long one lap takes is doable, especially with the speed up function of Open RCT2, which allows you to speed up the game up to 128 times. After waiting for a little while, we can see that the car finishes the first of 20 laps after 204 in-game years and 27 days. For easier calculations, I will convert this to days first. There are 245 days in an RCT year, so the length of a single lap is 245 times 204 plus 27, which is 50,007 days. To get the length of the total coaster, we have to multiply this by 600. This means that the total length of the coaster is 600 times 50,007 RCT days, which is 30,004,200 days. Now that we have the length in RCT days, we can convert it to real time. I measured the length of a 31-day month with a stopwatch, and from there calculated that the conversion factor between real time and RCT time is 6,541. This means that to get from the number of RCT days to the number of real days, we have to divide by 6,541. Doing this gives us 4,587 real days, which is over 12.5 years. This means that if you would put both rides in test mode right now, you wouldn't get the test results back until the year 2031. Even with the highest speedup that RCT2 provides, it would take over a month to test the ride. I thought the previous record was unbeatable, but clearly I was wrong. For now I cannot come up with a way to beat this record, but who knows what's possible. It might be possible to somehow make a chain of synchronized rides that takes even longer, or maybe some other mechanic entirely. That was it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about the limits of the game. The save file is in the description. I'm not sure if it works in RCT2 Vanilla, but it will work if you have opened RCT2, of which a download link is also in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.